With the cremation of the second victim to fall prey to COVID-19 in Sri Lanka yesterday, questions arose whether a victim's religious faith should be taken into the equation when deciding on the manner in which his or her final rites are carried out. In this case, the victim was of Islamic faith and the final rites of the deceased caused a stir as it is contrary to the faith. Now, I have with me President's Counsel Ali Sabry. As a lawyer and a member of the Muslim community, I've invited you here. Let's start off talking about this. This is a very sensitive topic, Mr. Sabry. Yes, you're bound by your faith, traditions, which are very important to us as individuals. At the same time, this is a pandemic globally. The WHO has certain guidelines. If you're burying a victim, yes, there are certain guidelines, or cremation. Yeah. But particularly of Sri Lanka's situation, personally, as a member of the Muslim community, let's start talking about this.
Personally, if you talk to me, I think that the country's law and the medical concerns should take precedence over anything else. But I'm sure WHO also shouldn't have just come from nowhere and made this regulation. They would have studied so many things and put this regulation which permits a burial too. Okay. Most of the countries, about 182 countries, are permitting that, including England, Turkey, England, Italy, India, Malaysia, Singapore, and all those things. So if we have for good, valid and medical reasons, or logistical reasons, had to deviate from the WHO guidelines and to have our own guidelines to only to have cremation, I think there was a duty owed to give that explanation and say that, though these are the regulations, and even at the time of the death, the regulations permitted a burial. So if you want to deviate it against the wishes of the family and want to go for a cremation, you should have done it with consultation and proper explanation. So I think
what do you say here? What should have been done in the sense when you say? Are you saying that the message has not reached the grassroots of the community or leaders of the community, or this has not been discussed? But then again, the question arises: is it possible at a situation as this to discuss all this? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. In fact, what happened was originally about 2 weeks ago, they placed certain regulations. That was there was some inconsistency with the WHO regulations. WHO regulations permitted the burial. Sri Lankan original regulation did not permit the burial, only a cremation. Then the community got activated and made representation with facts and figures from other parts of the country and gave those to the task committee, and they have a medical body within that for them to amend the regulations. So regulations were amended accordingly and burial was placed. So at the time of the death, burial was permitted, even in terms of the Sri Lankan regulation as well as the WHO regulation. So if you want to deviate it from it, they could have been informed. But
so personally, you don't have a problem whether it's burial or cremation. Is that what you say?
Personally, if you talk to me, I understand this is the country's health and the country's security and the country's progress is very important at this kind of a pandemic. But for some people, it's very, very sensitive.
Especially when it is your faith and traditions that you have believed in.
For a long period of time. So it's particularly because they also know in today's age, through the internet search, you will find all these other countries are permitting. They will say that if the other countries are permitting, why not here? So in that kind of a situation, it would have been ideal that we educated them.
That's your concern here. If we talk to you as a lawyer, what is your opinion here? Because the country's legal situation, as you said, national security, and you're somebody who has always spoken about Sri Lanka, because this is a fight against a virus, a global pandemic that the entire nation is coming together. And as the WHO chief said, this is something that everyone has to fight together. But at the same time, sensitivities of the people. Sri Lanka has seen several communal, issues. But are we going to let people manipulate this situation into that? When you see social media, a lot of misinformation, disinformation surrounding this topic.
That's the most important thing. If we are to meaningfully fight this pandemic, we need to get everybody on board. people should all feel we are all part of this fight. If somebody feels that I've been left out, I've been singled out, a part of the community is singled out, it's going to be difficult. So in that kind of situation, it has to be inclusive decision. So there is no two-word that the final say is with the national authorities. They have to decide, even though guidelines are there, the WHO guidelines are there. I don't think anybody will question that. It's possibly how do we get the Muslim community on board also and explain to them and engage in a discussion and tell them we have to, in this kind of situation, we have to deviate, we have to cooperate. I think majority of them, vast majority of them would have accepted that and move on with it. Now here is a situation, there is WHO guideline, there is Sri Lankan guidelines, which both permitted at the time of the death. Permitted burial, but burial had not taken place. Then on the next day morning, without any announcement whatsoever, that regulation changes and burial is taken away and only the cremation is allowed. So that the process lacked transparency, and as a result of which some interested elements on both sides of the divide had used this to create uneasy tensions between the community, which is counterproductive to the larger effort. Right now, the biggest effort is to beat the coronavirus. So in that sense, if somebody is trying to isolate a section of the population, it's going to be difficult.
But finally, this challenge to beat and eliminate coronavirus, COVID-19 from Sri Lanka, we see the security forces, health authorities and policymakers coming together to structure a way forward, a plan, while others implement these. But again, what is the responsibility not just of one community but of all communities to ensure that you don't propagate ideas as these?
Of course, I mean, we must all understand this entire mechanism and put forward to look after them. If you don't cooperate with it, you are the first victim. Your family member is the next victim. Your neighbor is the next victim. And your village is the next victim before you give it to anyone else. So you have to be educated on this and you have to cooperate with it. There is no other solution other than fighting it together. So that is what it is important, that this is not the time to be divisive. This is not the time to play the racist card. This is a time for all of us to stand up together as Sri Lankans and support an excellent effort by the government, by the security forces, medical forces. They are in the front line. So this is time to support them, not to distract from the main cause. Main cause is to fight the virus, fight the pandemic, not anything else.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sabry, for joining us. We had with us Attorney at Law, President's Counsel, Ali Sabry, joining us.